Good morning, Metal as you know. Welcome to a new episode of a Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the latest studio album from Hatriot, entitled From Days Unto Darkness. Hatriot's been around for a little bit in the underground thrash metal scene, but it has been a hot minute since we heard from them. Their last album was released in 2014, which came right off the heels of their 2013 debut album. Why did it take so long for the band to get their shit together for another record? I can honestly say I do not know, but I wouldn't be shocked if it had something to do with the fact that their previous singer, Mr. Steve Souza of Exodus fame, had something to do with it. Not that he's at fault or anything, but obviously him leaving Hatriot to rejoin Exodus and do the Blood In, Blood Out record and go on a massive tour, obviously that would have impacted the status of Hatriot. But again, I don't really know, and it ultimately doesn't matter because From Days Unto Darkness picks up immediately where the previous record left off. It is every bit as violent and hostile and front-forward abrasive as the other records, even more so now. It feels like it has even more of this extreme, brutal edge fueling it. The Exodus-like attitude that Steve injected into this sound remains, but now it has the forceful energy of modern Creator and Testament, I would say, but with none of the intricacies and none of the technical prowess, which is also a bit of a downside, but we'll address that later. First, let's address the elephant in the room. Steve isn't there. An iconic metal voice, his project, his band, he's gone. So how does Hatriot recover? Well, Hatriot recovers by promoting bassist Cody Souza, Steve's son, to man the vocal pipes, and as it turns out, he is scarily similar to Steve. Like seriously, everything you expect from a modern Steve Souza performance, including the weird, almost goblin-like thrash metal snarls, remains intact via Cody. This isn't bad by any stretch. I mean, the people who do know of Hatriot, the people who remember and listen to Hatriot, are even expecting this kind of style by default, again, because of Steve Souza. But it does rob Cody of the opportunity to be a little bit more original in his vocal performance and bring some of his own ideas to the table. And when the band really starts to dip their toes into some Exodus-level worship, they suddenly sound like a second-rate Exodus. Take, for instance, on a track like Carnival of Execution, which is a song that, on pure surface level, without knowing anything about the band members, could easily pass for a song left off of any of Exodus's last records, including Blood In, Blood Out, which had Steve on vocals. It's not a bad track. I mean, it gets the headbang and it gets the blood pumping, and if you've been impatiently waiting for new Exodus, it'll certainly satisfy you, like no doubt there whatsoever. But it robs them the opportunity to be more individualistic. It robs them the opportunity to be Hatriot, and now they sound like Exodus. And it also really doesn't help that most of their songwriting, frankly, is just pulling from the grab bags of other famous thrash metal bands. I mean, we've already noted some notable influence from Modern Testament and Creator, at least as far as the forceful energy goes. But there's also notable influences from Suicidal Tendencies in some of the album's punkier moments, some outros here and there that even sound straight ripped from Suicidal Tendencies. Opening track One Less Hell is a fantastic example of what I'm talking about. It noticeably harkens back to You Can't Bring Me Down. And this isn't even the worst part of the record. The worst thing about this record is that all of these songs are far too fucking long. Songs bleed together as the band continuously recycles and reuses templates and ideas from these older thrash metal bands, and then they drag it all out for no reason whatsoever, as far as I can tell. I think the idea is that it'll just inherently sound bigger and more ambitious, but that's not what happens at all. Instead, it just makes these songs that would be cool in a 3-minute format, it makes them sound really bloated and tired, and by the end of it, I'm almost clocked out. For God's sakes, you've got 2 tracks on here that both come out to about 7.5 minutes long, and frankly, the only modern thrash bands that can make songs that long and still turn out good are Vector and Revocation, and that's mostly because, again, they have a much more technical component. There's much more going on musically within those bands, to the point where I don't even know if I would call them strictly thrash metal. Despite showing very blatant worship for 80s thrash metal, the band seems to forget that the best thrash metal doesn't tend to go on for 7 minutes. And when it does, like on a track like, say, Master of Puppets, it's usually because the band has something to say. It's usually because the band is throwing in a lot of different ideas. They're not just slamming down the same riffs over the span of 8 minutes. Honestly, you could trim 1 to 2 minutes off of every single song, and all of them would automatically become tighter tracks, far more digestible, far more enjoyable. Now, there is still fun to be had here. I mean, even bad thrash metal is still kind of good, you know? Thrash metal is inherently a very fun and energetic genre, so it always catches my attention almost immediately just for being that. A particularly great standout moment being the aforementioned Carnival of Execution, again thanks to being on the shorter side, as well as the track Dazed into Darkness, which is very nasty and brutish and has some interesting soft-plucked, almost synthesized acoustic guitars that add a weird level of atmosphere to contrast the abrasive thrash metal. And then there's Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, which, again, is way too long for what it is, but it does almost get by on the sheer lunacy and insanity of it all. So I'm going to give this thing a 2.5 out of 5. I mean, it definitely has issues in the songwriting department, but it does get by on its high-octane, blood-pumping energy, on the violent nature and aesthetic of it all. It can be genuinely a very fun record, particularly if you are a die-hard thrash metal fan. In fact, if you are, and you love Hatriot, and you're also waiting for an Exodus record, you know, you're gonna go fucking nuts over this thing, no doubt about it. The issues that I've talked about, they won't bother you for literally a second. Like, really, if the worst thing I can ultimately say about a thrash metal record is that it sounds like other bands and it's not written the best, then that's not really a whole lot, because let's be honest, thrash metal as a whole is not the most innovative genre. Some of the most popular modern thrash metal has frankly come from bands that have made their entire career off of just repeating sounds and ideas from older bands, to much better executions, mind you, Iron Regan and Power Trip in particular standing out there. But nonetheless, I mean, I can't really give Hatriot shit if I'm letting those guys get away with it. I guess with that in mind, this is like a super enthusiastic 2.5 out of 5, you know? Not in the sense where it's like, yeah, this is an okay record, I don't know. But more in the sense of, yeah, it's an okay record. Check it out if you like thrash metal. Which I guess brings me to the only other point I have left. If you don't give a fuck about thrash metal, this record would not under any circumstances change your mind whatsoever, because, again, we're not exactly dealing with some really great innovative songwriting here. So, as noted before, a weirdly enthusiastic 2.5 out of 5. If you're looking for some super extreme, brutal, modern underground thrash metal that stays close to the old school sounds and formulas, by all means check it out. But if not, there's not really any reason to give this a listen, unless you're just curious. I don't know. But yeah, 2.5 out of 5, it's okay. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe to get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.